I knew the HOA president was getting a little out of control, but I still wasn't prepared for what I saw that Saturday morning. I was out front watering the lawn when a black SUV pulled up across the street. The HOA president stepped out holding a clipboard, which honestly wasn't unusual anymore. But then she walked over to my yard, looked down at the grass, and pulled a ruler out of her pocket. An actual ruler. At first I thought maybe I was misunderstanding what he was seeing. I wasn't. She crouched down in the middle of my lawn and started measuring individual blades of grass, like she was inspecting a crime scene. Right there in front of everybody. Neighbors walking dogs, kids riding bikes, people driving past, and this woman was kneeling in my yard with a ruler. That's when I realized two things. First, this HOA situation had officially crossed into crazy territory. And second, judging by the looks on my neighbors' faces, I wasn't the only person getting tired of it. Because what happened after that little inspection didn't just turn the neighborhood against her, it turned the whole street into a problem she never saw coming. The thing is, my lawn wasn't bad. It wasn't overgrown. It wasn't full of weeds. It wasn't one of those yards where people drive by and wonder if the house is abandoned. It was normal. I mowed it every week, kept the edges trimmed, watered it when it needed it. Honestly, it looked about the same as most of the lawns in the neighborhood, which is why the first violation letter caught me completely off guard. It said my grass exceeded the HOA's acceptable height standards and needed immediate attention. Now, technically, the rules did mention lawn height, but the wording was vague. It said grass should be maintained at a neat and community-appropriate appearance. That's it. No exact measurement. No official height listed. Just community appropriate. So I mowed the lawn that same evening anyway, mostly to avoid the headache. Problem solved. Or at least, that's what I thought. A week later, another notice showed up. Same issue. Apparently my lawn was visibly inconsistent with neighborhood standards. That wording made even less sense. Because at that point, I started paying attention to other yards around me. And mine wasn't even close to the worst one. A couple houses had grass way taller than mine. One neighbor hadn't edged their sidewalk in months. Another guy basically had dandelions running a small government in his front yard. But somehow, I was the problem. That's when people on the street started talking. Quietly at first. One neighbor mentioned she got a warning because her flowers were too unorganized. Another got cited because his trash cans were visible for a few hours after pickup day. Everybody had a story. And almost all of them started after the new HOA president took over. That's when things started clicking into place. This wasn't really about lawns. It was about enforcement. The HOA president had become obsessed with proving she was cleaning up the neighborhood. And every week, there seemed to be some new thing she was measuring, photographing, or complaining about. Still, even with all that, I never expected her to literally show up at my yard with a ruler. Because once that happened, the entire neighborhood stopped seeing it as strict and started seeing it for what it really was. After the ruler incident, the whole neighborhood started buzzing about it. At first, it was just people laughing. Not in a mean way, more like nobody could believe it actually happened. One neighbor across the street asked me, completely serious, was that a school ruler or one of those metal construction ones? Another guy said he watched the whole thing through his kitchen window because he thought maybe she'd dropped something in the grass. Nobody expected the answer to be, "Nope, she was measuring my lawn." But the funny part didn't last long, because a couple days later, more violation notices started showing up around the neighborhood. One family got warned about chalk drawings on their driveway. A retired guy got cited because his American flag pole was supposedly too reflective. Someone else got a notice over a basketball hoop that had been there for 8 years, and every single conversation started sounding the same. "This is getting ridiculous." That's when the neighborhood group chat exploded. Normally, it was quiet, mostly lost packages, recommendations for plumbers, people asking if anyone saw a missing dog. Now, it turned into a full HOA complaint forum overnight. Pictures started getting posted, violation letters, warnings, screenshots of emails. Then somebody uploaded a blurry photo of the HOA president kneeling in my yard with a ruler. That photo spread through the neighborhood faster than anything else. People were zooming in on it, circling the ruler in red, turning it into memes. One neighbor captioned it, "CSI, Grass Division." Another wrote, "Measure twice, fine once." And honestly, that's when the HOA president made her biggest mistake. Because instead of backing off after realizing people were upset, she doubled down. At the next HOA meeting, she stood up in front of everybody and announced that stricter enforcement was necessary to maintain property values. Then she specifically mentioned lawns, said homeowners had become careless. That did not go over well, especially after people had already seen the ruler photo. The room got tense fast. People started pushing back, questions, complaints, arguments. One guy literally stood up and asked if the HOA planned to issue official ruler sizes to homeowners moving forward. People laughed. The HOA president didn't. And the more serious she got, the more frustrated everyone else became. Because now, it wasn't just me getting singled out anymore. The whole neighborhood was starting to feel like they were being micromanaged or absolutely nothing. And once enough people start feeling targeted at the same time, something changes. It stops being one homeowner fighting the HOA and turns into the entire neighborhood getting fed up together. The breaking point came the next Saturday morning. Right around the same time, the HOA president usually drove through the neighborhood looking for violations. Only this time, the neighborhood was waiting for her. When I walked outside, I immediately noticed something was different. People were out everywhere, not randomly, intentionally. One neighbor was mowing a lawn that was already perfectly cut. Another guy was out there with a tape measure stretched across his driveway. Someone down the street had tiny orange construction flags stuck in their grass every few feet like it was a survey site. And then I saw the rulers. Dozens of them. People had stuck rulers into their lawns all over the neighborhood. Some were serious. Some clearly weren't. One family had a giant wooden yardstick planted next to their mailbox. Another neighbor taped a ruler to a leaf blower. One guy sat in a lawn chair drinking coffee while slowly measuring individual blades of grass with reading glasses on like he was conducting scientific research. The entire street had basically turned into a joke aimed directly at the HOA president. And right on schedule, the black SUV appeared. The second she turned onto the street, people started watching. You could actually feel the anticipation. She slowed down almost immediately, probably because every yard suddenly looked insane. Rulers everywhere, people pretending to inspect grass, neighbors waving measuring tapes in the air. One kid even held up a handwritten sign that said, "Grass checkpoint ahead." I'm not even kidding. The HOA president parked near the entrance and stepped out of the SUV, looking completely stunned. And for the first time since she took over, nobody looked intimidated anymore. People weren't angry. They were laughing. That's what made it worse for her. Because once authority becomes a neighborhood joke, it's almost impossible to get it back. A couple homeowners walked over and started asking her questions. Real questions. Why were some houses getting targeted, but not others? Where exactly were these standards written? Was there an actual grass height rule or not? And for the first time, she didn't really have answers. Not clear ones, anyway. Because the more she tried explaining it, the more unreasonable it sounded out loud. Especially with half the neighborhood standing there holding rulers. After that weekend, things changed fast. Not officially at first. There wasn't some dramatic announcement or apology, but everybody could feel it. The violation notices slowed down almost immediately. Then they basically stopped. No more warnings about grass height. No more complaints about flowers being too unorganized. No more random enforcement over tiny things nobody cared about. And interestingly enough, the neighborhood still looked exactly the same. Property values didn't collapse. The streets didn't turn chaotic. Nobody's lawn suddenly became a jungle. Turns out people were already taking care of their homes just fine without someone walking around with a ruler. A couple weeks later, the HOA held another meeting. This time, the tone was completely different. Instead of talking about strict enforcement, the board started discussing reasonable consistency and improving communication with homeowners, which sounded a whole lot like, "We realized everybody's mad." And from what I heard afterward, several board members privately told the HOA president she needed to ease up before the neighborhood turned completely against the association. Honestly, that had probably already happened, because the ruler incident became legendary on the street. People kept joking about it for weeks. Neighbors started leaving rulers on each other's porches as a joke. Somebody even printed tiny fake certified HOA grass inspector badges and handed them out at a barbecue. And weirdly enough, the whole thing actually brought the neighborhood together. People who barely talked before were suddenly outside chatting, laughing, sharing stories about ridiculous violation notices. All because one person pushed things just a little too far. In the end, my lawn stayed exactly the same. Same grass, same yard, same neighborhood. The only real difference was that people stopped treating the HOA president like someone untouchable. Because once the entire neighborhood sees how ridiculous something is, the power behind it starts disappearing fast. And apparently, nothing destroys over-the-top HOA authority quicker than a street full of homeowners holding rulers and laughing at you. I would love to know where you all are watching from. Drop a comment which state you're in right now, and hit that subscribe button and make my day.